Dad. Timothy was no genius, but then he was 8, so he still had lots of time to figure things out. There was plenty that he knew. For instance, he knew that monsters weren't real. He knew that it was perfectly safe to go into the basement all by himself. He certainly knew that no zombie hand was going to reach out from the dark behind him if he lingered too long on the stairs. And, knowing all that, he sprinted out of the cellar like a frightened squirrel. Stupid, 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 he thought. Dad always told him it was stupid to be afraid of the dark, and Timothy figured that made sense, because, however afraid he was of the dark, or monsters, or bad dreams, he was much more afraid of getting a good wallop from Dad for being a scaredy cat. Dad hated scaredy cats. Anytime he thought Timothy was turning into one, he'd try to swat the scared right out of him. For a moment, Timothy thought, maybe he's afraid of scaredy cats. But that hurt his brain to think about, and Timothy was no genius. After escaping the basement, Timothy trotted off to the garage where Dad was waiting for him. Timothy was supposed to bring an adjustable crescent wrench, but he didn't know much about tools, and Dad didn't like to explain things. As a result, the boy was lugging an assortment of tools ranging from a screwdriver to a rubber mallet. Timothy could tell right away that he had done something dumb from the look on Dad's face. "Now, Tim, what did I ask you to get? An adjustable crescent wrench? Then why did you drag out all of this crap that I'm gonna have to put away? What I wouldn't give for a smart kid. Get over here." He grabbed Timothy by the ear and dragged him up to his bedroom. Tears welled up in his eyes. He was not the least bit tired, and Mom had promised him a piece of pie if he was good. But he knew better than to make a fuss. Dad didn't like that either. So, when they got to his room, Timothy crawled into bed without a word. As he lay, despondent in his twin bed, Timothy tossed and turned, restless. He kicked his feet in a fit of tiny, quiet rage. Something was stirring in his chest. It was wrath, the kind of anger only children and psychopaths can have. It was pure, unobstructed by critical analysis of the situation or his role in it. Hell hath no fury like that of a child sent to bed early. There were many nights that Timothy would lay for hours, seething with tears almost boiling off his cheeks. Tonight was such a night. Timothy oozed out of bed like syrup off the edge of a plate. Only instead of pooling onto the countertop, he flopped onto the floor of his bedroom. From there, he inched his way closer and closer to the door. This was less out of fear that his parents might wake up than it was about ritual. Angry, bitter, resentful ritual. Timothy didn't kid himself that he was going to run away. That was baby stuff. He knew as well as any kid that he was trapped here at home. When a kid runs away, nobody asks them where they're going or why they left. They just send you right back to where you came from. Even if it's lame. Even if they'll give you a good wallop when you get home. No, Timothy was creeping downstairs to steal his piece of pie. He was promised one, and that was what he would get. That was what he would get even if Dad pulled his ears till they were all red and stingy. Even if Dad was going to be a big meanie. A big effer. Crash! Timothy froze. At first, he didn't know what it was. He was still in stealth mode, so his first instinct was to flee. After a deep breath and a glance down the hall, towards his parents' room, he asserted that the coast was clear. Timothy was no genius, but he remembered a couple months back there had been a series of nasty rainstorms. He vividly remembered how mad Dad would get when Timothy would run into his parents' room to hide from the storm. And that wasn't the worst of it. One night a branch crashed through his bedroom window, and when Timothy woke his dad, he got a nasty wallop before he could even explain what had happened. Dad said, "That's what you get for crying wolf." Timothy hadn't the slightest idea what wolves had to do with anything, but then again, Timothy was no genius. After all, it was stupid to be afraid of a storm and run to your parents' room for comfort, right? It was probably stupid that he didn't know anything about sad wolves either. With this in mind, Timothy decided to figure out what exactly had gone crash before he woke up his dad. The last thing he needed was another wallop. A tearful lump of anger welled up in his throat. He swallowed it and made his way down the hall. From what he could tell, the sound had come from the bathroom. He could see that the light was on under the door. That was odd because Dad hated leaving lights on. Perhaps Dad was up then? Using the bathroom? If that was the case, Timothy ought to just go back to bed. No reason to chance it. His stomach grumbled at that thought. If there was even a remote chance of him getting his pie, he had to take it. He decided to press his ear to the door and listen. If it sounded like Dad was in there, he'd go straight to bed. If not, pie time. He inched his way closer and closer to the door. He winced as the floorboards creaked beneath him. As he neared the bathroom, he could vaguely make out a sound coming from inside. A sort of sucking sound, like someone was eating an orange. Maybe Dad was unclogging the toilet? A few more steps and he could hear a faint drip, drip, drip. With his next step, the door swung open violently. It was Dad. Oh yes, but he was not working on the bathroom. Lying on the floor, drenched in an ever-widening pool of blood and broken glass, was Timothy's dad. Perched on top of him was something Timothy had never seen before. He could make out several spider-like legs, but its head was buried in his dad's neck, gnawing it down to the bone. The creature seemed to be blurry. Timothy couldn't get his eyes to focus on it. It was like one of those magic eye books where you had to cross your eyes just the right way in order to see the image. When you did that, you could see a sort of vague outline, but you couldn't focus on any one point. That's what it was like to look at this creature. The beast withdrew from the bloody neck and stared at Timothy with glowing red eyes. Its gaze was penetrating. It felt like venom in his body. He couldn't move. He couldn't think. But he could feel. It was that lump of anger that he had swallowed before. It was being drawn out of him. When it reached his mouth, he let out a cry of anger and fear and began sobbing on the floor. Without looking back at the beast, he ran to his parents' room, screaming bloody murder all the way down the hall. "Mommy! Mommy!" "What the hell is all that racket? I swear to God there better be a damn tornado coming if you just woke me up at 1 in the goddamn morning." Timothy stared at his parents' bed, stunned. In it lay his mother, staring groggily at him, and his father, untouched, completely, 100% fine. He was so shocked that he could hardly speak. I saw you were hurt, and Dad grabbed Timothy's ear and dragged him down the hall. "That's enough out of you. You wake me up for another nightmare again, and I'm gonna tan your hide, mark my words." "Ow!" Timothy moaned. He expected to feel anger all over again, but nothing. It was like the anger had been drained from his body. All that was left was pain. Pain and indifference. He didn't like this feeling, or lack of feeling, rather. It felt empty, like when you lose a sneeze. Dad slammed the door behind him and left Timothy alone. He burst into tears, emptying the trauma of the night onto his pillow. He cried himself to sleep. He didn't want to think about what had happened. He didn't know what happened. And he didn't care. After all, Timothy was no genius. For all he knew, people had weird walking dreams like this all the time, and it was just that no one had told him about it. Just like no one had told him about crying wolves. It was all like zombies and monsters in the basement. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Timothy was tired of being stupid. And besides, however afraid he was of that creature, he was even more afraid of Dad. The next few days were an absolute drag for Timothy. He was walking on eggshells around Dad. His hide was tan enough as it is, and he needed to build up a lot more good behavior before anyone would even think about offering him a piece of pie again. But he was getting close. He had cleaned his room without being asked, folded his clothes, and even taken out the garbage, all without a single screw-up to mar the record. One night he came home from school to find Mom and Dad waiting for him in the doorway. As he trotted up the driveway, it became clear that this was not a pleasant greeting. They were not happy to see him. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. What's—" Whack! Dad walloped Timothy upside the head so hard it made his world spin. He immediately sunk to the ground, crying in earnest pain. "The money I spend on you for your damn books and your damn crayons and all the crap you come home whining for, and you're not turning in your homework? Your teacher's got to call me on the phone and tell me you're flunking?" Honey, swatting him like that ain't going to make him listen any harder. Well, clearly neither is an expensive education at a good school. Up to your room. No supper. I don't want to see you the rest of the night. If you're going to cry about it, I can take you up there myself. Timothy didn't budge. He only sat there, wailing in utter despair on the ground. He had been trying so hard to be good all week. In fact, the reason he hadn't gotten in his last assignment was because he was busy folding clothes over and over to make sure they looked neat and proper. And after all, Timothy was no genius. Isn't that what his dad was always saying? If he was so stupid, why did everyone expect him to do all these smart things? If he was so stupid, why did everyone expect him to just figure out how to be smart? If that was possible, then there wouldn't be any stupid people, right? They would just figure out how to be smart, right? His train of thought was interrupted by Dad grabbing his ear and dragging him up to his room. Timothy wrestled and bawled, trying to escape, but it was no use. He found himself once again lying in his bed, crying and cursing and damning everything around him. The fury hurt, but it hurt good, like when you wiggle a tooth. It was therapeutic. His face was hot with tears, and that, combined with the warmth of his bed and the exhaustion of an awful afternoon, was enough to put Timothy to sleep at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. When he woke, it was the dead of the night. The sleep felt good. It felt safe. He stretched and yawned some clicks and cracks out of his bones. He rolled over on his side, hoping to catch another wave of sleep. Instead, a loud crash brought him back to full attention. It was the same crash he heard a few nights ago. He pinched himself hard. Ow! Still awake then. It wasn't a dream. This wasn't a dream, and neither was last time. He knew it. The rage began to well up inside him again. It wasn't fair for him to get a wallop for something that was real. Or at least, sort of real. He marched out of his bedroom, determined to settle the matter. If he could prove that this creature was real, Dad would have to apologize for being such a meanie, such an effer. And he'd have to give Timothy pie, as much as he wanted. He marched toward the bathroom, radiating righteous anger. As he approached, the door swung open again, only this time it wasn't Dad on the floor. At least, not all of him. His body lay limp in a pool of blood and glass like before, only this time his head was missing. The chime of falling glass drew Timothy's attention to the window where the dark creature loomed. From its blurry jaws dangled Dad's head, blood trickling from the base of his neck. Timothy had forgotten how scary all this was. He tried to back away, but the beast caught his gaze again, and, like before, it reached within him and pulled out a yowl of rage. When it was done, he dropped to his knees in exhaustion and cried. He was relieved to hear Dad running up behind him. He would be able to sort this whole thing out. At the very least, he would learn that Timothy was whack. Dad popped Timothy upside the head. "Dad, look!" Timothy pointed towards the bathroom. It was all gone. The beast, the fake Dad, the broken glass. It was just the boring old bathroom again. He hardly noticed Dad dragging him to bed by the ear. And once again, he had no rage left for it. That thing had sapped it all out of him. He resignedly wept another night in his bed. until he fell asleep. Nothing happened for a long time after that. Timothy was having a lucky streak. He'd brought his grades up, he was helping around the house. He had been helping so much, in fact, that he learned what a crescent wrench was, and what a level was, and which screwdriver was Phillips and which was flat. Mom had even told him that tonight he could have the last piece of pie if he was good. He had one more chore left to do: mop the dining room. Mopping was tough because you couldn't step anywhere you just mopped. It was like a little maze or a puzzle. He was very careful to leave himself little paths to the places he hadn't gotten yet. If he accidentally stepped on a clean spot, he'd go back over it just to make sure everything was in order. This was probably why the task took him nearly 45 minutes. It took Mom about 10, but Timothy was no genius, and it was his first time, so he was only worried about learning. When he was finally finished, he rushed over to the kitchen to ask Mom for some pie. When he got there, his heart fell into his stomach. There, sitting at the table, was Dad, more than halfway through the last piece of pie. Mom entered and clocked the horror on Timothy's face. "Oh, honey, I was saving that piece for Timothy after he finished mopping the dining room." "Sorry, bub. You've got to be quicker on the draw next time. You can have the rest if you want it." Tears began to well up in Timothy's eyes. Tears and fury. "Now, if you're going to cry about it, I can send you right up to your room. Your mother and I are having a nice night, and you're sure as hell not going to sour it over a piece of pie." Timothy tried desperately to hold back the tears and fight the anger, but it was no use. He clenched his fists and stamped his foot as tears streamed down his face. Drip, drip, drip. "All right, you're making me do this, bub. I didn't want to." Dad crossed to Timothy and swatted him in the back of the head. Timothy hollered in anger and sprinted away. Dad grabbed him round the waist and slung him over one shoulder. He carried Timothy up the stairs and dropped the wailing child on his bed. Timothy was screaming now, throwing toys and pillows across the room. He jumped up and down on his bed until he couldn't anymore. He plopped down and cried into his pillow for a good, long while. His breathing started to slow. His tears began to dry. Before long, he was fast asleep. Crash! Timothy woke up. Calm, collected, as if something had devoured all the anger in him. He felt peaceful. He felt fine. He was no genius, but there was plenty he knew. For instance, he knew that the crash wasn't real. He knew that there was no evil red-eyed creature in the bathroom. He certainly knew that his dad's head wasn't oozing blood from its stump of a neck. That was not real. That was stupid. So when he heard his mother screaming in horror, it didn't worry him. He got up, walked out into the hall, past his screaming mother, past the bathroom, past his father's lifeless body, and past the tree branch that had somehow impaled him through the bathroom window. He walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator door. He noticed a half-eaten slice of pie. Timothy thought that sounded pretty good. He grabbed a spoon from the drawer, sat down, and enjoyed his dessert as ambulance sirens wailed in the distance.